What's your view of the lockdown policy that so many European countries and states in America have introduced?
I think it is a huge mistake. For example, they've found, as I understand, that children, even if they're infected, never infect adults. So why do we not have children at school? Why do we not have people working? England, France, Italy, Sweden, Belgium, Holland are all reaching levels of saturation that are going to be very, very close to herd immunity. So basically, and I think that's a good thing. I think the policy of herd immunity is the right policy. I think Britain was on exactly the right track before they were fed wrong numbers, and they made a huge mistake. I see the standout winners as Germany and Sweden. They didn't practice too much lockdown. They got enough people sick to get some herd immunity. The standout losers are countries like Austria, Australia, Israel, that actually had very, very strict lockdown, but didn't have many cases. So they have damaged their economies, caused massive social damaged the educational year of their children, but not obtained any herd immunity. I think in many ways, the European countries are fine. They didn't need to have the lockdown, but they will have all reached a high enough level of infection not to have to worry about further future attacks of coronavirus. The United States seems to be heading that way. They're certainly that way in New York City, but they still have a long way to go.
What you're saying is that you believe success, as we are currently measuring it, which is as few cases as possible and as small a spread of the virus as possible, is actually failure.
I think if you really control your epidemic, for example, California has now had lockdown for 6 weeks and wants another 4 weeks. They have so far less than 100 deaths. That means they don't have more, let's say, 100,000 in people. That is not enough to give them significant herd immunity. They didn't need to do all that lockdown. The lockdown, I think, is particularly hurtful in countries that don't have good social infrastructure. Countries like the United States and Israel, many people have been really, really hurt, especially young people. I think that everybody panicked. They were fed incorrect numbers by epidemiologists. And, this, I think, led to a situation. There's no doubt in my mind that when we come to look back on this, the damage done by lockdown will exceed any saving of lives by a huge factor. One very easy way to see this is an important way of looking at the death. It's also, right now we know that the number of excess deaths in Europe is around 130,000 up till yesterday. This is for all of Europe. This is for a population of around 330 million people. So an excess of 100,000 for this whole year is actually not that much. In some of the worst flu epidemics, we get to those kinds of numbers, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes a little bit less. Now, I'm not saying flu is like coronavirus. I'm just simply saying that the burden of death of flu is like coronavirus, especially when we correct for the fact that people who die from coronavirus are older on average than people who die from flu. Flu kills young people. It kills 2 or 3 times more people under 65 than does coronavirus. If we put those facts into the situation, we find that the burden of death from coronavirus, I'm fairly sure, will in Europe, where we have good numbers, be less than that of a very, very flu. Another factor which has not been considered are all the cancer patients who aren't being treated, or all the heart cardiology patients who aren't being treated. I've heard estimates of tens of thousands of people who are basically going to be dying because of lack of that treatment. And generally, again, the age group who die of cancer are younger than the age group who die of coronavirus. So if we could protect the old people perfectly, then the death rates would be very, very low. So for example, in Europe, I said there were about 140,000 excess deaths in the last, I think, 9 weeks. The number of those excess deaths who are younger than 65 is about 10%. So basically, 13,000 of the 130,000 deaths are actually under 65 years old. So, and if we had simply been able to protect our elderly people, then the death rate would have been much, much less. Remember, the key thing is to have as much infection for as little possible death, and also do whatever you can to keep the hospitals full but not overflowing. It's a difficult calculation. It's one which a country like Sweden can do, where essentially there's no political concerns. The trouble is that in Israel, that I know well, in the United States, everything is political. And therefore, nobody could say something like this. They would say, but you're not valuing death. So the thing that should have been done is for the media to stress to people that every day somebody dies, and these people are essentially in the same age band who die from corona, have other comorbidities, they have other diseases. And I'm getting documents from Italy showing that many of the COVID deaths were either dead before they were tested, or else they had up to 3 other conditions. So there's nothing wrong with this. People die for all sorts of reasons, but the news should be stressing this, and maybe they should be counting it as a 0.1 COVID death. Countries seem to be racing to have as many COVID deaths as they could. And this is a huge mistake. In the flu season, no one cares about these people. I mean, the total number of COVID deaths in Europe will be very similar to a severe flu season. And, you know, this is serious. Flu is a serious disease, but maybe we should just shut down the economy during the flu season. I mean, we need people should have been made to understand it.